Hello and welcome to the Daily Aus. I'm Sam.
I'm Zara.
We're almost at the end of 2024, and as the impacts of the COVID pandemic started to fade, there were hopes at the beginning of the year that the economic damage caused by the 3-year interruption would reverse, and it would be a year of economic recovery, growth, innovation, and opportunity. Well, that wasn't quite the case. It was a tough year for the Australian economy, with headlines about inflation, cost of living, housing affordability, and wealth inequality dominating the headlines.
Those are a bunch of topics that we have spoken about on this podcast at various points throughout the year, and we've brought you updates and explanations and the stories behind each of those topics. But as we now conclude the year, where are we at?
Well, if we look ahead, the tune has changed a bit. Australia's Treasurer Jim Chalmers says that the worst is behind us. Donald Trump has promised Americans a great economic year ahead. And the RBA has even signalled that it may be warming to the idea of a drop in interest rates. On today's pod, we're going to chat to Matt Grudnoff. He's a senior economist at the Australia Institute about how the economy fared in 2024 here in Australia, what he thinks is going to happen in 2025, and what's giving him hope. Matt, thank you so much for joining us on the Daily Aus this morning.
Thanks for talking with me.
Let's pretend that we're 10 years into the future and somebody comes up to you and asks, what was 2024 like economically? How would you answer that question?
It was a bad year, I think. It was a year that the economy only grew by 0.8%. So, I mean, that's the slowest growth we've had since way back in the 1990s when we had a recession, outside of the pandemic, of course. It was a year in which households struggled. We saw particularly housing increase, not just interest rates and mortgages, but also rents went up substantially. It was a year where households stopped spending, and household spending makes up about half of all of economic activity. So that's the reason why it grew so slowly. And in fact, in per capita terms, that is per person, we actually went backwards for the entire year.
Right.
So it was only population growth that saw the economy grow at all.
And if I had you in this conversation 12 months ago, were you expecting the year to pan out in the kind of way that it did?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know is the short answer, but economists are constantly asked this. And what I say is macroeconomic forecasters exist to make astrologers look good. We are really bad at predicting the future, so I'm not going to pretend I would have known. But high interest rates were definitely part of it, and interest rates were high before this year. And so it was probably not a huge surprise. Those high interest rates have really dragged on households. It's made it hard for them to spend money because they're paying so much more for their mortgage. They're paying so much more in rent. And so they're just not able to spend as much of their money on all the other things they need to buy.
And with an amazing year, really, of international news. I mean, we had the most people go to an election, I think, at any other point in history. There was international conflicts that continued very strongly throughout the year. Do you think that we can attribute a lot of the economic pain that we've felt in Australia to those global issues?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So this massive outbreak of inflation we've seen in Australia over the last couple of years has happened internationally. It's caused by supply side factors emerging from the COVID pandemic, the war in Ukraine, climate change sort of impacts with flooding and droughts. And it's certainly, because it's happened all over the world, it has to have been caused by international factors. So yes, absolutely, this has been the pain that households are feeling has more to do with international factors than domestic factors.
And so do you think then, based on that logic and based on the fact that we don't seem to be any closer to resolutions in some of those major conflicts around the world, we now have a president in the United States who is quite isolationist in his economic policy and wants to keep jobs and manufacturing in America. Do you think that then will continue, us feeling that sort of pain from global conditions?
I think that next year will be better. And, again, economists are bad at predicting the future. Yep. But with that in mind, I think it is going to be better next year. And the reason is because inflation is ebbing away. We see it across the world. All countries are seeing their inflation rate come back down to a more normal level. And that will continue in Australia. And when it gets back into the Reserve Bank's target band, the area of inflation they want to keep inflation at between 2 and 3%, then we'll see interest rates come back down. We'll see economic activity pick up and things will get easier. But, look, absolutely, there's going to be weird curveballs. Trump is nothing if not chaotic. We don't know what that's going to bring. But I have a feeling that it'll actually be more chaotic for people in the US than it will be for the rest of the world. But that said, I mean, America is the biggest economy in the world. When weird stuff happens there, when their economy struggles or, strange stuff happens, it does affect the world economy, and we're part of that.
Speaking to a young Australian, how would you expect them to first get a bit of a signal in their daily life that things are getting a bit better?
Hello, Billy here from TDA. We have just looked at our YouTube analytics and 95% of you who are watching our videos aren't subscribing. If you want to help independent media like us grow, the best way you can do that is by pressing subscribe. Thank you so much, and back to the video.
I think they'll notice that prices stop increasing. Now, it's really important to know that when we say inflation's coming down, that doesn't mean that prices are going to go back to where they were last year or the year before. It just means they're stopped going up quickly.
Coffee's not going back to $3.
It is not. It is not. Those days are gone. But what will happen is it probably will mean that their wages, which have actually been going up slower than inflation, that is, the amount of stuff they can buy has been shrinking, they'll start to see their wage increase faster than how fast prices are going up. They will probably, if they have a mortgage, if they're lucky enough as a young person, there's unfortunately not very many of those, they might see interest rates fall. Rents probably won't be rising nearly as fast. We might see an easing on the housing, the really acute tightness of housing. That's not to say that the affordability crisis will go away. We've spent 20 years screwing up the housing market. It's going to take more than a year or even 5 years or 10 years to fix the problem. But I think that the main thing they will see is that their wage will start increasing faster than prices, so they'll start getting a little bit of breathing room.
Matt, do you think we're headed for a cost of living election? Let's say it's called, April, May-ish. Do you think that's going to be the number one topic?
I think definitely, yes, that's going to be the number one topic. That and interlinked with that, because the two are one and the same, is a kind of a housing or the cost of housing kind of as part of, they're going to be the main election issues, I think. We've seen that in all the elections that we've seen, and we've seen a lot of elections this year. We've seen that around the world. I don't think Australia is going to be any different. Voters are grumpy at the moment. They're grumpy because, their standard of living has been going down, not up. And they're upset about that. And, incumbents tend to face the pain, whether or not they're completely at fault. They tend to be the ones that cop it when voters are grumpy.
Final question from me, Matt. Here at the Daily Aus, we end every news bulletin where we do headlines with some good news. And you and I have talked today about some troubles that the economy has experienced in 2024. You're saying things could look a little better in 2025, but it's far from a massive resurgence based on your economic astrology.
Yep.
Is there something giving you hope about economic forecasts looking ahead? Or has there been something in 2024 that's given you hope in the economy?
Yeah, I think that the thing that's giving me hope is that because this inflation is a worldwide phenomenon and because it's going down all over the world, I think we're well and truly through the worst of it. That is, I think that, part of 2023 and 2024 are going to be the bad years, and that things will actually be better next year. I think that incomes are going to continue to grow faster than inflation. And I think that people won't necessarily suddenly wake up one day and everything will be great, but week by week, month by month, they're going to notice things getting better. And we couldn't say that for the last year.
Matt Grudnoff, Senior Economist at the Australia Institute, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for chatting with me.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of The Daily Aus, taking a walk through the year that was and what will come with Australia's economy as we head into an election year. We will be back later today, of course, with the headlines, but until then, enjoy your Wednesday.